We know that you were a financial journalist first, and now you are an air pollution evangelist, and you're an advocate for mitigating air pollution and combating the challenges that we are faced with because of air pollution and other health issues caused by it. So it would be really great if you could talk a little about your journey, about the transformative journey that you've had from journalism to now advocating for air pollution and related issues.
Sure. So I always was aware of air pollution because as a journalist, my office was at Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg in New Delhi, which had this big monitor which would tell us, even back then, I think this was 1991, when Delhi was at that time second most polluted city. Mexico City was the first. And I would notice it, and I would notice how my clothes would turn sort of gray black by the end of the day. But being young and like you people, I also at that time thought I was immortal. It didn't really bother me that I was breathing in this vast quantity of toxic air. And then, as you know, later Delhi changed from using petrol and diesel, especially diesel in public vehicles, and everything went CNG, including our three-wheelers. And it seemed for a moment, because that was a pollution you could actually see and notice. It seemed like the skies had cleared up a bit. But my journey really began when as a financial journalist, I had resigned a full-time staff position at Dow Jones and moved to the US as a trailing spouse when I had two young children. And when we chose to move back, my husband and I decided to move our family back. It was a very active choice to move our children to our homeland, because we wanted them to grow up knowing what their identity was, their rich heritage, what India was like. And to spend time with grandparents and friends and family. So we made this active choice to move back. And that's when I started noticing, because I think as a mother, when you have young children dependent on you, is when you sort of get even more responsible. And I noticed that their friends were falling sick, they were falling sick. My friends were falling. Everybody seemed to be, the winter, would start and people would start getting sick. And it seemed to me that either there was some sort of virus in the air, or this was the air pollution, the toxic air that Delhi had, that was causing it. Then I was fortunate enough to meet other parents who had similar concerns. A lot of them were expats, and they told me that I had been, they said, you were foolish. I mean, it was literally those words. You were stupid to come back to India with such young children. Air quality here is terrible, and you've made a big mistake. Meanwhile, I had been born and raised in Delhi, so my friends whom I had grown up with said, oh, come on, this is nothing. We've all grown up, we're all fine, the usual story. And in fact, they said, oh, you've lived in the West, so you've become paranoid, and there's nothing called evolution. So as a journalist, the only thing I knew and I was qualified to do was research. So I just dived in. That was the time the internet had become very sort of it had come up, and one could get information at your fingertips. And when I got into that kind of information seeking, I found to my horror that not only was there toxic air that I was breathing, but all that information was out there for anyone to get. It was not as if it was a hidden secret. Let me put it that way. So there was a lot of information. There were many research papers. There was good science that was backing this thesis that air pollution was causing a lot of the health harm that I was seeing. Excuse me. So that's when I think I realized that this needs to be taken much more seriously. And so I banded with other parents who had young children, and are also professionals who were public health experts, who were one of them was running a hospital, another one was a lawyer. We all banded together to form an organization called Care for Air. My lawyer co-founder actually petitioned to the Supreme Court on behalf of three young toddlers to ban firecrackers for their right to breathe clean air. And fortunately, over the period of 3 years, we managed to get traction in that. Yes, and the legislation that came out that said first they banned only the distribution of firecrackers, and then subsequent years they banned the manufacturer as well, manufacture of firecrackers, which was good, but that was not enough because air pollution, as you know, is caused by several different factors. The contributors are, at least there's a bouquet of contributors, and so there needs to be a bouquet of solutions. And the petition that my colleague had made, in fact, included all those things like crop stubble burning, industrial emissions, thermal power emissions, all of that. So that's how my journey started. And then over time, I realized, because at that time I was writing columns on startups since I'd moved back from the Silicon Valley, and I'd been a financial journalist. I had started writing a column called Garage Gigs, which was about startups and entrepreneurship in India. But soon I realized, after writing this for about 5 or 6 years and doing the other air pollution work on the side, I realized actually that is more meaningful because it seems to make a difference, to spread awareness and make other people who are like me, who were not aware and then in denial, because I also didn't want to believe that this is actually happening. And in the beginning you feel so powerless. You feel that what can I just as an individual do to make a difference? This is such a big global problem. How can I stop it? So that's when I started writing on air pollution and air pollution alone. And subsequently, this was, I think, 2015-16, and in 2017, around Diwali, just when we were celebrating the fact that we had got some wins from the Supreme Court, my mother got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and the doctors who were attending on her were quite sure this was triggered by the foul air that she had breathed all her life, because she had lived in North India all her life. She was a non-smoker, so there could be no other reason, they said. And that was very, very traumatic for my family, and especially for me, because to know so much about air pollution and yet not be able to prevent somebody you love, somebody who'd given birth to me, not to be able to prevent their suffering, and to watch it and watch how there is no palliative care for lung cancer, unlike other kinds of cancers where you can give painkillers, morphine, etc. There is no palliative care for breathing. If you can't breathe and you're struggling for every breath, it's awful to watch. And that's when I realized it's even more important to fight for clean air and write more about it in simple language, simplify and amplify the science, because we want to be only giving credible information, credible science, amplifying it so that everybody, because whether you're rich or poor, whether you're any class that you come from, any sort of caste that you come from, whether you're old or young, anybody who has lungs suffers from this. And in fact, over my journey, I realized it's not just our lungs that are affected. In my mother's case, it was her lungs that got affected the worst, but we are suffering. Every organ of the human body suffers from air pollution, because PM 2.5, which is a particulate matter that I have focused on in my book, really is so tiny that it gets absorbed in our lungs and through our lungs into our bloodstream, and then goes into every organ of our body, and therefore every organ is affected. And I wanted to make sure that people knew that this was not just a temporary cough or respiratory issue this is affecting. So I wanted to connect the dots between air pollution and human health harm. And the only way that I thought I could make meaning out of my mother's death, as well as try and do something to build awareness, was to write a book in very simple terms, so that other people could realize, this is not just something happening to other people, it's in all our backyards.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And you said that you continue to live in Delhi, which leads me to my next question. So I've also done my college in Delhi, and I've been affected by air pollution. And we've also, we were advised last year to leave our campuses and go to, Himachal or Uttarakhand for a vacation when the smog levels were very high in the area. And our college is in Sonipat, so which is in the heart of the stubble burning problem. And so I've faced this firsthand. But at the same time, Delhi is the national capital. It offers a plethora of opportunities, and um, as youth get attracted to go there and start a career there, and you have been attracted by your memories that you had in Delhi. So how do you navigate this feeling? Because in your book, you also say that air pollution related health harm is 100% preventable.
Yes.
And so, how do you navigate this sentiment and still continue to live
Yeah,
there?
so it's a very tough journey. I have to say it's a very tough navigation. There is no map to that I can say, well, this is how you do it. But you have to make you have to take and make choices that are firstly protecting yourself and your family, and then of course choices to solve this bigger problem of air pollution. Now, I will not say masks and air purifiers are solutions. They are just mitigating factors so that we can reduce our exposure to air pollution. But the actual uh, um, air pollution itself can only be solved by reducing emissions. And that is what we need to exhort our governments to do. We need to hold our corporates and our governments and individuals, each other, responsible and accountable for air pollution's health harm, because ultimately whether it is what happens in situations like this, and that's why I wrote the book in the manner in which I wrote it. If you start talking about climate change to people who don't really know much about it, they listen to you politely for the first 5 minutes and then their eyes glaze over, because this is something happening in the North Pole, in the Arctic, glaciers are melting there, but it's not affecting me, it's not in my backyard. So people will listen to you politely for a bit and then forget about it. But when you start telling stories, we're human beings and we relate most to stories, starting from stories that we hear on our mothers and our grandmothers lap when we are little. So stories are the way to pull people in and to make them realize the seriousness of a situation. And that's why when I started writing the book, I decided to personalize it. And it was hard to do that as well, because I am a fairly private person, and to share my story and to share my family story and my mother's story was not easy. You have to make yourself vulnerable to the world, to their judgment. But I felt it was important to do that only because that is how people will relate and realize that this is not something happening to somebody else. It's happening today, right now, in my backyard, in your backyard. Today it's my mother, tomorrow it could be somebody else's mother, it could be my children, your children. It's all of us, anybody who lives in a polluted place. And now COVID has shown us that there is also research that shows that people who live in more in highly polluted areas have a greater chance of getting COVID, more severe COVID, and greater chances of it spreading. So there is a lot of research that backs all these things. So by I don't think there's anybody who can see even a single plausible plus of air pollution. So yeah, I think I've answered your question there, but if I
Yeah,
haven't,
yeah. Yeah, you have. And you've also kind of partially answered my next question, which was about, your writing process, because I love the way the book has been written. So it's a
thank you.
narrative, it's a personal story, and at the same time, it has a lot of information, it has a lot of statistics, scientific facts, which validate the points that you put across. So which makes it, really easy to convey the message to laymen like me and many others. So, could you talk a little about your process of writing? How do you approach it and
Sure.
how do you go about it? Yeah.
Sure. So I have been a journalist for all of my working life. But even before I was a journalist, I used to love writing, and I have authored, you know, from school magazines, college magazines. I always used to write, and I always liked the creativity of writing. Writing, by the way, is a very lonely process. You have to sit in a room by yourself, be comfortable with yourself, and structure your thoughts in a way that you think will be most easily able to reach your readers. It's important to show versus tell. So rather than saying air pollution is killing us all, you have to show how it does that. So I think for me, it was very important to use every part of my creativity in trying to uh, recalibrate and bring attention to a problem that I felt very strongly about. There are some excellent other books on air pollution, very scientific books, which which and also books that try and explain and simplify air pollution. I was just talking. I was at the Jaipur Lit Fest the other day on a panel with Siddharth Singh, who has also written a very good book on air pollution. It's called The Great Smog of India. But again, he's tried to simplify it. But even so, it's still a scientific book. When you personalize a story, then people can relate to it. People can say, yes, that could be me. And I think that is the only way to sensitize people and to make them understand that this is not just something that will go away on its own. We have to do something about it. So it is to build awareness, build outrage, so that there is a, you can then funnel that outrage into ways of bringing better policy, maybe compliances. Basically, until people don't know, they cannot act. So awareness precedes any kind of action. And I also feel what the mind does not know, the eyes cannot see. And therefore, especially with air pollution, which is not visible, I call it the invisible killer. You really can't. Even I, when I was in denial, and I really didn't want to believe such a big problem had surrounded us and we didn't even know about it. Until I didn't see the monitors, I didn't start monitoring. Now you have these low cost sensors, and I have a couple of them around. I always measure air quality wherever I go. But before that, I didn't know. If somebody told me, how are you so sure that there is air pollution? Show me. How can I show them something that the eyes can't see? So I think it was important to bring the science and the personal story together in a way that people could relate to both the science and the personal story. And that's what I tried to do in the book. And it was a very tough book to write. I will say it was an emotional book to write because it took me back to the days that I had to sit with my mother in hospital, all those memories. It also took me back to the times that I myself maybe didn't really realize. Maybe, I don't know, would I have come back if I had known the problem was so bad? I don't know. But if I had not come back, I would have lost the time that I got with my. So, you go through all these inner sort of conflicts, and it is the best way to write a book is to try and I think it's very important to try and get into your reader's head as much as stay in your own head, and have that empathy to say, look, this is what happened to me and I don't want this to happen to anybody else. So I think that's all I tried to do, and I tried to personalize a very universal story.
That was great. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I think that more and more people should read the book to understand the severity of the problem. Because even now, when I talk to my parents, they have the similar kind of thought process, and I think it is something that I would recommend them to read as well. So yeah, you talked about COVID-19 and its effects on people who are living in polluted cities. And during COVID-19, we saw that it severely impacted. It had a positive impact on the air pollution levels throughout the world. So we could see the Himalayas from UP, and it was a great sight. The skies were blue again. So do you think that this has made some kind of a shift in people's thought processes, and would they now see environmental challenges like air pollution differently, and would they be more aware and try to bring some kind of lifestyle changes? Do you see a hopeful future now?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think the silver lining of COVID and its lockdown was definitely that people were able to see what we had been telling them. Again, coming back to the see versus tell. People saw for themselves how the skies became blue, how the air cleared up, how you could see the Dholadar mountain range and so many other ranges. There were people who tweeted saying, I never believed my grandmother when she said I could see the mountains when, from where we lived in Saharanpur, I think this was.
Yeah.
And the fact that people could see that, yes, this is how what we have done to our planet. I think that's important, and I think people will remember that. So I think that was one very big plus of that COVID lockdown. Of course, not the best way to do it because, of that lockdown, there were a lot of people who had, all the economic uh, slowdown, and all the economic trauma that people have faced. So that's not the way to bring down pollution levels. But I think it was important as a sort of an organic experiment as well, because it also proved to us that air pollution is not unvanquishable. You can vanquish it. It is reversible. It is anthropogenic. That means human beings have caused this, and we can also solve this problem. So I think if I were to look at it with hope, I would say I think it was a very good, it was a definite silver lining to be able to see that yes, we made a mess of our world, but you know what? It's still reversible. There's still time. We still have hope. And if people take the right lessons from this, and if countries, choose a greener path of a revival and greener and sustainable growth, I think this will have been a good warning, and this will have taught us the right lesson. Now, whether we are doing it or not, I don't know. Some countries seem to have learned, some countries are making pedestrian pathways, cycle tracks, they are choosing green ways of growing. India, I think maybe because we are a developing country and we still want to sort of reach higher and higher levels of economic growth to pull our, levels of the poor people up from the below poverty line to more economic efficiency. I think in our case, sometimes the wrong decisions are taken. For example, we are still relying a lot on coal, and we know coal and fossil fuels are one amongst the dirtiest fuels to use. I think if you don't choose green growth, then you're going to become a fossil yourself, because it's really, we're getting there faster. We need to make those choices actively. At this point, I don't think we are doing enough. I don't think our targets are ambitious enough. We are doing some things, and I think that is a very good positive. Like, for example, Delhi has notified an electric vehicles policy. It is trying to build infrastructure around that, and it is trying to get electric buses so public transport could get a boost. Now, those things are very good things. I think even in the central government, you have the Prime Minister's Ujjwala scheme, which is a very good scheme because it's trying to provide clean fuel. Although that's still a fossil fuel, LPG, to households that burn biomass, which creates a lot of health problems. So I think there are certain steps that are being taken, but I don't think they're nowhere close enough to what we need to do to protect our young, to protect our elderly, to protect all of us. And choosing wealth over health. I mean, you ask anyone, if even the richest billionaire, if you tell him, I'll give you another $1 billion, but let's give you cancer with that, I'm sure nobody is going to choose that. So, I think it's very important to keep sight of our goals, that we need economic development, not just economic growth. We need sustainable development. We don't just need increased GDP numbers. Where are we going to go with the numbers? So I think it's very important to make that distinction.
Yes, thanks a lot, ma'am. You also answered, another question of mine, which I was going to ask about, the battle between economic development and the planet and the environment.
There is no
So,
battle. There is no
yeah,
battle. No, no, absolutely. I would, and I think you know that as well as I do. In fact, I think our younger generation knows that better than our generation, that there is actually no conflict between economic growth and the environment. It's a construct. In even GDP numbers, GDP itself is a construct. I mean, when it was started as a measure of economic growth, you had to start somewhere. So you picked a bunch of things. I mean, the economist who came up with that picked a bunch of things. You say, okay, this is how productivity is going up. At that time, you did not take into account that there are also other developmental parameters that you need to embed in this. Now we are evolved enough, and in fact, we should not even be following GDP growth. We should be following something that encompasses health and education and other softer goals that, without which human beings cannot be really happy and content and healthy. So those are the things that we should be. So there's no conflict between those things. The conflict comes when there are externalities. Let's say I want to make more money, and I will buy a cheaper polluting fuel, and the profit of that goes into my pocket, but the collective cost of that, you also get asthma, he also gets asthma, everybody gets asthma, but that is not built into the fact that my profits are only going to me personally, but the cost is being shared by all of us. Now, if those were actually taken and broken down and actually added in a way where you could see what are the costs and what are the benefits, you would see quickly that the benefits are being pocketed by the people who are using these externalities to their benefit. Whereas if they had to pay for that polluting flow, let's say each person suffering from asthma said, okay, I need you to compensate me for this, and each person said, pay me because you polluted the atmosphere and you forced me to breathe that air, that industrialist or that government entity would not use polluting fuel. So I think that has not been taken into account. The day that cup becomes, and it's, I think that day is coming, because more and more banks and financial institutions are looking to see who's spending in what are the companies, where are they investing, is it a dirty business, is it a clean business. I think that day is coming where the money will show us which way we should be going in terms of whether we are using polluting fuels or not. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, recently we also wrote this article about the effect of solid waste on air pollution,
Mhm.
and in Delhi that is one of the major contributors to air pollution. We see these landfills which are as big as mountains,
Yeah.
and so is the case in West Bengal as well, in Kolkata as well, which are the two most polluted cities in the country right now.
Yeah.
So, what do you think can be done to mitigate this problem? Because Delhi and Kolkata are densely populated cities, and
Yeah.
sometimes it might be a you know uh, um, civic problem to be able to segregate waste and facilitate proper collection and disposal for all the people living there. So, what do you think can be done for this?
So, the first thing that I think needs to be done is, if we are all aware that this is causing such a big problem to us, then we need to hold our, whether it's our municipalities, whether it is our central government, we need to hold our government accountable. We pay our taxes, we expect a certain level of competence in handling waste. There are already some rules, etc., which are not being enforced. Those rules need to be enforced. Compliances need to be taken care of very, very seriously. Now, you can tell people at an individual level that please compost, please segregate your waste, and some of us do that. But when the garbage collector comes and he takes your three different bags and puts it all in the same place, then what have you done? You've done nothing. So I think it's very important for that entire process, from the point of starting, the whole circularity of a circular economy needs to be maintained. Now, here I'd like to say another thing, which is a real, it's a real bugbear of mine, my pet peeve. You cannot say that things like smog towers will clean the air, okay? Because smog towers are completely inefficient. There is no science that is backing the fact that, okay, smog towers will clean outdoor air. In fact, I read a report last week that Delhi is getting these two, three smog towers, and they're going to have 1,200 filters to filter out the pollution. Where are those filters going to go? Guess what? They're going to go into our landfills. And because our landfills are already overflowing, they're going to be burnt and then they're going to go back in our lungs. So, actually, those smog towers are going to end up polluting the atmosphere further. So, we don't want these kind of red herrings, these kind of electoral gimmicks that will make people feel, oh, my government cares for me, they're building smog towers. No, we need to reduce emissions at source. That's the only way to reduce air pollution, is to reduce emissions at source. So I think, again, you've asked a very, very important and a very, very urgent question. How do we get our cities to become more livable? How do we create cycle tracks? How do we create pedestrian pathways? How do we create urban living and rural living in a way that's sustainable, where I don't have to get into my car every time I want to go and buy groceries? How do I get, even if I want to buy on e-commerce sites, I should be able to vote with my wallet. If today, if Flipkart is giving me, is delivering to me in electric vehicles versus Amazon, which is using fossil fuels, I should be willing to pay more to Flipkart to deliver to me on electric vehicles, whereas it might even cost less. So that's my way of supporting an organization which is actually make trying to make a real difference in these areas. Plus, I want to say one thing: air pollution is not a, it does not stand independently of
Yeah.
anything else. It is embedded in our economic policies, it's embedded in our urban development policies, it's embedded in our health policies. So I think this whole concept of embedding air pollution in every single policy, every industry should look at what their air pollution footprint is. And as individuals, what we can do, we are not powerless. We can vote with our ballots, we can vote with our wallets, we can hold corporates accountable, we can hold governments accountable, and we can say that you cannot take away the only thing that we need to stay alive. Involuntary, I mean, breathing is an involuntary activity. You cannot take away our clean air and give us money instead. Even if they don't give us money, make money and take away our clean air. So I think it's very important to be aware and to keep our governments and corporates accountable in every which way. Why can't there be a public private partnership in just in our solid waste? I mean, make sure, for example, you have companies which have, the amount of, I don't want to take names because everybody uses plastic packets, but the number of, you travel from any part in Kolkata, let's say you just want to go to the Sundarbans, all along the way you'll find plastic packets, Maggie noodles, Leher, Haldiram. I mean, this is the corporates who are selling and making money. They should also have the responsibility to clean up. The government can't do it alone, and the government definitely needs to do it to start. You have a we have a prime minister who talks about Swachh Bharat. How can you have Swachh Bharat without Swachh Hava? So I think Swachh Hava needs to be integrated into the Swachh Bharat campaign. I think we need leadership right from the top all the way down, from the level of the prime minister down to the grassroots, every one of us. And that's the only way we can beat this monster of air pollution. Otherwise, it's going to kill us all. And if you have read in the book I have mentioned about the University of Chicago's AQLI. It's one of the
Yeah.
indexes, and there are many such indexes. Not everybody has to agree with the science behind each of them, but what they're saying is true. By living in an area which is so polluted, you are reducing your life expectancy. So I think it's very important for people to stand up and say, you're taking away the thing that's most precious to me, which is my life, and nothing, no money, nothing can compensate for that. And that's the only way. When people vote on this, when this becomes an electoral issue, when companies realize, well, investors are not going to invest in us unless we clean up our act, literally, I don't think there's going to be change. So it's really up to actually young people like you, who are the future of the country, to make this kind of a difference, to talk to others in every aspect of every industry. This needs to be the first thing that people think about. What is the air pollution footprint? I know there's a carbon footprint that everybody worries about, and I worry about it too. But let me tell you, the air pollution footprint is much more immediate. There is a definite link between air pollution and climate change. But air pollution is going to harm me today. Climate change may do it tomorrow, but before that, I'm already harmed by air pollution. So we need to deal with both, but we need to prioritize what we're doing. And since they're both linked, reducing one will usually help reduce the other.
Yeah, that was a great response, ma'am. And you said a very important thing about, the Swachh Bharat mission. Just today, I was going to an article which said that how the Swachh Sarvekshans, they are based on things that we can see. They rank things that we can see rather than things that actually matter, such as, getting process involved, such as getting certifications. They base their rankings based on visual cleanliness, which can be done just a few months before the Sarvekshans actually taking place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really important point that you made.
And don't forget, air pollution you can't even see. So
You can't even see. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So you need to have more monitoring stations. You need to have more local research. You need to spread that information. You need to. I think ultimately it is pollution. In one of the chapters I've written about this wonderful documentary that this Chinese journalist. Chai Jing had made. It's called Under the Dome. And in that, she said something that stayed with me. She said, pollution smells of money. And it's true. The minute you start making sure that pollution, people who are polluting, if you make sure that the polluters are paying, then they will pay, then they will pollute less. And I don't mean that go ahead and pollute and then pay and then keep polluting. No, I think you have to make the penalty so high that they don't want to and they are not
Pollution.
able to pollute. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Uh, Also, there was a line in your book, that air is the greatest democratizer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the poor and the rich are disproportionately affected. We see poor people living near the landfills. They are the most vulnerable to air pollution. They don't have the facilities or the resources to care for, diseases caused by air pollution. And often, we burn air pollution in, we point to the farmers saying that they burn the stubble, which is causing air pollution in the northern parts of the country. But then, what option do they have? Have we really provided them with the alternatives? So, do you think the government is taking steps in this direction, to actually give farmers with alternatives or give people with alternatives rather than just, blaming them for and penalizing them for burning their waste?
So you made 2 points here, and I'm going to take the first point first, and then the second point. The first point you said was, in the book I've said that air pollution is the ultimate democratizer, and it is to the extent that everybody is equally affected. At the same time, I would agree with you. In fact, I've said in another part of the book that air pollution affects the poor even more than it affects the rich. In fact, in the beginning, when we would talk about air pollution, we were always told, oh, this is an elite problem. There are so many other things. People don't have do time ki roti nahi hai, poverty hai itni. People are more worried about these things. Corruption hai. My point is, this is absolutely the basic thing. And the poor, for example, if it is very polluted outside, people from privileged backgrounds, you and I can maybe stay at home. We can wear masks, we can put on our air purifiers, and we decide that we'll take the day off or we work from home. I don't think a construction worker can do that. I don't think a traffic policeman can do that. I don't think auto rickshaw drivers can do that. And that because immediately they will not get their day's earnings. So it, and not only that, the access that the poor have to healthcare services is also less than the access that the rich have. So in many ways, the poor are much more affected by air pollution. It's a social inequity, and that's why I think it is very important, because when we have elections in the country and the poor people are told, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, vote for us. I think the first thing, if the day people realize that giving something is comes next. First, don't take away something from us. You're taking away our life, you're taking away our breath, and that has to stop first. The day people realize that, I think governments will start taking air pollution very seriously. The second point that you talked about was, is the government doing enough when it comes to, especially you talked of crop stubble burning. Now, crop stubble burning is an entire issue in itself, and I've dealt with it in one chapter of my book. Whereas currently in North India, crop stubble burning has been happening for years. But what has happened is that we are no longer using sustainable farming practices. What has happened, especially in Punjab, is that we are growing the wrong crop in the wrong state. And now we're growing it at the wrong time, because rice was never grown in the north. It was more, jawar, bajra, all the ancient grains. Rice, after the Green Revolution started, we started growing rice in Punjab. It requires, it's a very watered, high, you need a lot of water to grow rice. Punjab is water scarce. So you're giving them subsidized water, subsidized fertilizer. When you burn crop stubble in places like this, not only is the PM 2.5 high, the chemical fertilizer and the chemicals in the fertilizer also cause worse than normal pollution. Now, the government can definitely do much more, and not just the central government, the Punjab government as well. Everybody is complicit, and by blaming each other all the time, it's not going to help. What the government should be doing is making farmers aware, and there are ways of, you don't have to use heavy mechanization in the farms. People have talked about happy seeders and all these machines that, yeah, so they are a solution, but there are even cheaper solutions, because you can't say ₹10 की माचिस है और 50,000 का हैप्पी सीडर है, कौन सा यूज करोगे? ऑब्वियसली ₹10 की माचिस. You have to give them equally economical solutions. Now there is this pusa composter which last 2 years they have been talking about. This has been around for a long time. Why has the information of this and education about this not happened? There's a research institute, an international research institute, which is funded by the FAO, which has been talking about how sustainable use and using sustainable methods of farming, including using composting and there's an actual paper I've referred to and cited. It says it actually increases productivity because when you're burning your crop stubble, you're also removing nutrients from the soil. You get a lot of carbon in the soil. So when you are not doing that and you're using sustainable practices, your productivity goes up. I think it's very important to educate farmers. I don't know, you're probably too young to remember a time when there used to be this program called Krishi Darshan, and
Yeah,
that program in the
on
evenings,
DD.
yeah, so yeah, so it used to talk about. So I think we need more of that. We need to educate farmers, because farmers are not just lighting up and going away. They are also the victims. They're the first victims of the smoke that comes out of their villages. And I think it's absolutely wrong. I'm against crop stubble burning. So if a farmer asks me, no, हम poor farmer है, हमको crop stubble burn करना है, I would say नहीं करना है, किसी को नहीं करना, क्योंकि आप लोग भी उतना ही सफर करते हैं जितना हम सफर करते हैं. But what is the alternative? We have to first provide farmers with alternatives, teach them what it means, educate them. And we have a whole agricultural ministry. We are paying taxes. We have some of the best brains. Indians have some of the smartest brains. You see an Indian going to other countries, they're shooting up to the top. They can do the same out here. We have some of the sharpest and brightest brains. I think all our scientists, etc., can't remain in their silos just coming out with papers. They have to go out there and educate, or the government has to find a way of educating farmers of all these policies and all these techniques. It doesn't have to be a high tech technology, high innovation tech. It could be a simple pusa composting pellet, that you give to a farmer, which also costs 10 rupees. I think those are the kind of solutions that farmers need to be given. And it's not just crop stubble burning. There are 10 different things that contribute, and each of those need to be taken. And I unfortunately, I feel the government is not doing enough. I mean, it is doing something somewhere, but it has not been doing enough. And I hope now that with more attention on air pollution, the government is compelled to do more and is held accountable, because the government actually is the biggest polluter amongst all. If you just look at the industries that the government itself is in, they themselves are polluting more than the others. Even in the power sector, the government's own power companies are extremely highly polluting. So it's very important for the government to clean its own house first, and then enforce what the existing laws are amongst the others as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a great answer as well, and we hope that necessary steps are taken immediately. So your organization Care for Air has also been spreading the word about air pollution, making more and more people aware about it. So would you like to tell us about what are your next plans? What are your short term and long term plans for your organization, and what do you aim to achieve in the next few years?
So, Care for Air started as a platform, like I said, of some of us who felt very strongly and passionately about air pollution and didn't want to just sit and complain in our drawing rooms. We wanted to go out there and do something about it. So, we started with the Pollution 101, which is an awareness program. We basically created it was a derivative PowerPoint presentation we created, and we took it to schools to try and explain it to children, because we found children have the most open minds, the most receptive. Try and explain to your mother and father what air pollution is, and hear them say, बेटा हम ही ने तो आपको पाल पोस के बड़ा किया है, हम लोग हमने सब ने ये हवा breathe करी है. We've done it with our own parents. So we realized that children are more open and receptive. So let's go to schools. We started with that. Then we went to the next step, which is we created a Pollution 201, which was more of a deep dive for high school students to come and learn about air pollution, because we thought these will be our student ambassadors. Whether they get into environment or become lawyers or become anything, whichever field they're in, even if they are with a consulting company, McKinsey, this, that, they will always remember this, that, if they don't take care of the planet, the money is going to be useless. So that was our next step. Since in the last 6 months, we've been working with a lot of college students in Delhi, and others as well, through networking, through Zoom calls, where these college students now go to schools and present through Zoom calls, because of the pandemic. They present our awareness PPTs to schools, and we're trying to create more and more awareness amongst our schools
Youngest.
and colleges. That's been our current plan, but we are completely unfunded. We are a registered nonprofit, but we don't take funding from anybody, because we are also very aware of the fact that we want to remain secular, we want to remain non-commercial, we want to remain completely independent. So we're just trying to do what we can do as individuals and as a community of air pollution evangelists. So I think, in terms of our future plans, we have three verticals. We have a vertical on awareness and advocacy, and social media, which amplifies, simplifies, and amplifies air pollution, credible science around air pollution. And we plan to continue doing that for as long as we can, because we are all volunteers and we are all doing this in our spare time. So we will continue to do this for as long as we can do it. Our plans are to to create these, convert these air pollution PPTs into different languages, so that we can also reach out to other, we would love to have one in Bengali, we would love to have one in Tamil, and just reach out through schools, and at least for the young people, because more than us, it's your fight, it's going to be your planet. And if you don't know, the least we can do is sort of, hey, hold your hand through the process of fighting for what you should be. Actually, you shouldn't even have to fight to breathe clean air. But because my generation has not done enough, I think it's up to your generation to really demand clean air, clean water, and a clean environment to grow up and to, have your children and the future generations. So that's generally what our plan is now. But let's see what happens, because like I said, we are completely unfunded, and we have volunteers that come and go, and we'll just keep going until we can.
Yeah, yeah, ma'am, you're doing a really great work, and I hope that more and more people come and join hands with you and take your, your teachings forward and spread them across the country and the world. My next question would be slightly different. So, as you know, this interview series is being done as a part of Women's Day celebrations at UNYA. So, as a woman evangelist, as a woman journalist, have you ever faced any bottlenecks, any challenges because of your gender, or has there been any problem, any sort of you know barriers in your path because of the gender that you are from? So yeah, would you like to talk about it, and how do you deal with it? What do you do about it?
What do you think? What do you
Yeah, of
think?
course,
Of course, of
of
course.
course
It's
you have been.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is a reality that we all as women have to face. I have a daughter, and I see her working and struggling with this, similar issues that I struggled with 30 years ago, and I feel bad about that. But I think the world is changing, and I think, again, you are the change makers, all of you guys who are the change makers and who will make a difference. Because I see my son, and I see how much of a difference he makes in his workspace. And I feel proud of that. So I think it's up to us as women to treat not just our daughters as sons, but also our sons as daughters, and teach them empathy, teach them that men and women are both two sides of the same coin. We can do everything together, and if we are in conflict with each other, it's not going to help either one of us. And yes, I have had a lot of, even as a journalist, I think my gender has gone against me. At the time when I started as a journalist, my youth went against me many, oftentimes. I'm sure you have gone through that as well. But I think the only way to navigate that, and all of us know that, is just to be the best you can be at your job, to be better than the boy or the man who is vying for the same thing, to put up your hand when it's required, to, in a sense, yes, to lean in and to say, I can do this too, and not to keep your mouth quiet, and to, to stay back and be silent and hesitant, even if somebody says, oh my god, look at her, she's, putting herself out. No, because the men do it, and if the women don't do it, then they get left behind. So it's very important. I think your generation is different. I think there will be many more young men in your generation who will be more supportive than my generation had, and I think that's a good thing. And I think as a mother of a son and a daughter, I think the way I have managed to contribute without sort of holding the, how shall I say, holding the, uh, you know, feeling annoyed and angry about what I had to go through, is to try and teach my children that you guys can make a difference, and it should not be the same for your generation as it was for me. So even today, you'll find as an evangelist, um, as a clean air evangelist, women are seen to, give them the soft jobs, give them, you will find many times, even at conferences, I find, men will be asked to speak. You may know more than them, but you have to wait your turn. And I think mansplaining has become a term, but I think it always existed. But now at least people are acknowledging it, pointing it out, and and kind of shaming the men who mansplain into sort of stepping back and saying, okay, I think you should speak. So I think we've come a long way, and I think we will go a long way. But I think the idea is not to do it in conflict, but to do it in support of each other.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you. And yeah, I hope that happens real soon. Um, so, as an environmentalist, as a clean air evangelist, has that also impacted your lifestyle? Your choices, your food choices, your travel choices, and what would you suggest as us as individuals can do to try and help the cause of the environment? So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was always so I never wanted to, and I've said this in my book again. I never wanted to be an air pollution evangelist or an environmentalist or an expert on air pollution. I wish I didn't have to, but I think I always had, I think it's important to just know that this is the only planet we have. There is no planet B. And I think I always was very mindful of my choices. And even in my family, I mean, my children know that you cannot waste a single morsel of food. You don't take more than you need. You try to, just say, kehte hain, niyat, greed has to be reined in. I still have the clothes I wore to college, the ones that still fit me. I will still wear them. Sometimes people will find them very funny, and sometimes they will say, "Wow, that's so cool. That's in fashion now." And I feel it's retro. It's come back. But I think the important things to do is reduce, reuse, of course. Those old, those are important mantras to have. Reduce, reuse, recycle. But it all starts with using less. So, trying to just keep your desires within. I mean, I'm not saying don't have desires. Everybody has desires, and we must. This is life. But you must also choose your. In fact, I have to say that my daughter's team is making this little design thing where you have something called green glasses, where you can know, because fashion, by the way, is a very highly polluting industry. And if you knew when you went to a store to buy something, if you knew how much of pollution this causes versus this sari or versus this top, you would know how to which one you want to buy, right? You would be able to vote with your wallet, as I say. I think those kind of things are coming in. There's another website which is Good on You, which I think people are trying to use to figure out what are the things that have a low carbon and air pollution footprint. So those things are very good. What I do in my personal life, I have been composting for the past 5 years, and the joy it gives me is amazing. I mean, I hardly have any garbage, because the first month that I started composting, I noticed that my garbage came down to almost 80%. So I mean, it was like magic. And I'm fortunate enough to have a small garden, so I whatever I compost, I put it back in the soil, and I have only an organic garden. So it's like, you're giving back to the earth what it gave you. So I like that. We do try and use public transport where possible. So when the metro was on, I would try and use it. I had my metro card. It's not always possible to use public transport in Delhi. It's not very safe. I would not let my daughter water use it, but we have decided that instead of spending on other things, I'd like to spend on getting an electric car. So we've retired our petrol car, and we have now invested in an electric car. The other things that I feel that are important and that we all try and do at home, we try and buy less. I mean, whatever we are buying needs to be, I won't say essential. You sometimes do need to go a little beyond essential, but definitely something that you will use, more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times. We'll never buy something that, actually, I can't remember the last time I bought something. Definitely
Use
more
and
than a
throw.
year, but yeah. So we don't buy and throw. We believe in repair. We try and, so those are the kind of things you can do at your own personal level, and I think it's very important to spread that to others. I was always looking for people to carpool with when my children were younger and they would go to school, and people would laugh at me because the convenience of just going in your own car was too high. So then I put my kids on the school bus, and I think it had so many advantages for them. Not just the fact that they learned to use public transport at an early age, but they made so many friends. They
Friends.
became more
Yeah.
social. You don't just make friends with your own classmates, kids from older and younger classes. You learn to take care of the youngers. You learn to hold your own with the olders. So I think there are so many advantages to all of these things that come in, the hidden advantages. So yeah, I have tried to walk my talk as far as possible, and I hope I can manage to continue to do it. I mean, unless, like